It's Drew Furgiuele.
It me.
Welcome to the session, sir. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. How you doing?
Very good. Very good. So you should probably introduce yourself to the audience, a little bit about where you're from.
Yeah, sure. So we're live right now, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm late then.
No. Until a quarter after the hour, we just talk crap. We just talk shop.
And AKA my favorite time. After that,
superheroes. And then at a quarter after, we take, like, people can, for those of you two who are here for the technical questions, put your questions in now. It's just that we're not going to start answering them. Then at quarter after, we start working through first come, first serve. If you get them in now, odds are we're going to answer them. Whereas if you wait until a quarter after, it starts to get dicey.
Yeah, you could be like me and do no research and not know what's going on.
we have a FIFO queue. See, I had a Cuban accounting professor, and instead of saying FIFO and LIFO, he'd go FIFO and LIFO.
FIFO and LIFO.
I'm in.
I like that. Yeah, so where are you from?
All right, so right now I'm originally from southwestern Pennsylvania, but I live in Dublin, Ohio now, which is a small suburb just northwest of Columbus, Ohio.
How did you move from Pennsylvania down there? I mean, like, what made you do it?
Well, I love and I miss Pittsburgh a lot. I really do. It's where I grew up. I spent a lot of good time there, had a lot of good memories there, went to school there. The problem is that when I was getting my degree, at the time, Pittsburgh really wasn't the cool kind of technological center it is now. So, like, I'd be competing with, like, everybody for the same job. Yeah. So when it came time to go get an internship, I found one in Columbus, and I ended up moving out here and staying with family for a summer and did just, like, help desk stuff for, like, a summer. And then they brought me back after I graduated the year after that. And I did, like, help desk for, like, 3 months, and then they're like, hey, you have a degree. Can you do web design? And I'm like, I can try. So I developed some internal apps for a different corporation, worked there for 11 years, and then left to become a full-time DBA at my current role, which is with IGS in Dublin, Ohio.
I think everybody on the podcast, too, probably, we have all coded HTML at some point or another in our lives. And so that gives me tremendous, don't shake your head.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It gives me so much respect for developers because, man, I thought it was hard back then. Today, wow, it's amazing.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I got started with SQL servers. I was one of those accidental DBAs, right? It was like, we were developing these applications, and sooner or later we needed to store some stuff in a database. And at the time, everything ran on mainframe and Oracle. They were like locked away in the data center. You couldn't touch them, couldn't do anything with it. So when you went to the official powers that be of infrastructure at that company, it was like, well, we can give you a SQL server, or you can keep using MySQL, and good luck. But it became, all our applications kind of got back, had SQL servers to back end, so I had to learn about, performance tuning and blocking and all the stuff that, goes along with that. So, like, that's kind of how I got started with it.
So, Richie with his cats. So you teach a PowerShell class now. What made you decide to, hey, I want to go start teaching PowerShell?
I'm really passionate about the subject because when I started at IGS, I had never used PowerShell before in my life. And when I was interviewing with IGS and other companies when I was looking to move, it was, PowerShell never came up once. And then I remember walking in the door day one at IGS, and they're like, well, here's how we do our deployments with PowerShell, and here's how we configure stuff, and here's how we interact with Exchange. And I was like, holy crap, like, I had never used it before. I just thought it was a fancy blue DOS prompt. Like, I didn't know. So I didn't know anything about it or how to use it. So I had to get up to speed really, really quickly. And then after I started seeing how they automated stuff with, like, file system level stuff and Active Directory, I was like, well, wouldn't it be cool? We could do some stuff with SQL Server. And the support was kind of there. It wasn't great. I think anybody that's been working with it for a while will tell you that it wasn't always great. But it's really grown up over the years. It's really grown on me. I try to automate as much as I can, whether it's day-to-day maintenance stuff or deployments or permissions, database refreshes. Like, there's just so much you can do with it.
Mm-hmm. This is also a unique week in that everyone here is a car person. So, Richie, you drive a Mustang convertible now. What was your first Mustang that you ever had? Was it this one, or you've had them before?
No, I had a 1970 Mustang Fastback.
Oh,
302.
Yeah, you win.
Dual exhaust. Mm-hmm.
Wow. How old were you when that?
Well, my dad was the original owner, so I kind of took over the car about high school-ish.
Wow. Yeah.
And that thing was just loud, and there was a lot of tuning that could have been done to it, but it was one of those cars that was fun because there was no electronics, there's no nothing, and you could just get into it and do it. We redid like the interior like twice, and the exterior. Hurricane Andrew came and just really beat the hell out of it. They took the back of a 69, merged it with the front of the 70, and we were able to get that car going again. It was another restoration project we did, but man, that I miss that car. So I had one car, that was the one I missed the most. Sure. And then I had a 98 convertible, and then I bought the 2014.
And it's so perfect for Miami. I mean, it's the right car for Miami.
Well, except right about mid-May till about October.
Oh,
then you bring the top down. It's way too hot. There's no way. So usually about October till about right about now, you could bring the top down. But other than that, you're burning. You better have a lot of sun protection on because your ears be burning, your face be burned. It's no bueno. No, it's no good. No good, man. No good.
And you have the right car for Miami. So Drew, you probably have the right car for the icy Midwest.
Yeah, basically Ohio where spring never happens. So it's like, yeah, so right now I've got a four-wheel drive Mercedes. It's a sedan. Happens to be an AMG, NBD. But it's, I really, to Richie's point, right, like I really, really wanted to get one of the big V8 Mercs, right? But the problem is they're all rear-wheel drive, and that only really works, I don't know,
Miami.
6 or 7 months of the year if you're lucky in Ohio, and then when it gets wet or it gets icy, it gets kind of out of control here. Would love to have one, but the problem is like I don't have room for 3 cars, so I can't basically make something else my daily driver. Now my wife has a Outback or Forester, so I mean that thing goes anywhere if the weather gets too bad. But when I was shopping for cars, found a nice little midpoint with the AMG C43 model, and it's a great car. I mean, I've had it. I bought it last October, and it did great. And we've had more snow than we've had in recent memory in Ohio, so it worked out pretty well.
God, they
won't let me in Ohio. I burned the place down. They won't let me in Ohio at all.
Well, so just so you know, I have no dog in the Ohio State fight at all.
Well, obviously, because you're in Pittsburgh, but you're in the Lions Den.
Oh, I get it.
You're completely in the Lions Den.
Oh, there were
I won't even like enter Ohio anymore. Like there's no way. It's like it's dead. Let's build a wall around Ohio. No, we don't need to at the border. That is the border to me. Build a wall around it. Just keep everybody in. We don't need to get all the people out.
I expected Richie to be hostile about PowerShell, way more hostile about PowerShell than he was about Ohio. But, all right.
Well, I'm just trying to rile up the base here. I'm trying to look for these people who come through the questions. I don't care.
Well, here we go for questions. And Richard says, and Richard had this ready even before I got in the room. He'd already pasted this in. Richard says, when I'm doing monthly Windows updates on a failover cluster, should I update each node and then wait for a few days, then update the next one, or should I just update everything all at exactly the same time? Drew, how do you guys deal with patching over there?
We've gone through we've gone through all kinds of different ways of administering patches, like at least where I work. I mean, we used to do WSUS, and we've tried System Center, and now we use a third-party solution. But if I can stomach the downtime, I like to do it all when I can, just because if, God forbid, I do have to fail over, because we had an instance one time where some patches got applied to a SQL server, system level patches and SQL level patches, which we like to do separate, but for whatever reason, they all went at the same time. And we were noticing that the failover wasn't behaving very well because it was taking a long time for it to start up, or it wouldn't start up because the system databases got patched to a higher version, even though it was all SQL Server 2008 R2. So we ran into this weird situation where like we were running on 2 different CU levels, and it got really dicey. So if we patch in a window where I know I can take the extra little bit of downtime with the failover, that's what I like to do.
I'm one of those where I've just been burned enough by updates. I'll usually try and do like half of them on one weekend and then wait and see if they bake out and shake out and then do the half the next weekend. But it makes your workload higher, not lower. It depends on how much downtime you're allowed to take too.
Right. It's like you've got to have 2 windows to do it at that point, unless you do the failover ahead of time. And depending on how tolerant your apps or your business processes are to that. I mean, I think it really depends on the person.
Yeah. Niraj has an interesting question, and it's awfully open-ended. Niraj says, and I should make sure, yeah, Drew, you can see these. Okay, good. I was going to say, that's why I always say the name first. Niraj says, I have an in-person interview tomorrow morning. Any suggestions?
Show up.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. If you're not early, you're late, is what I would say.
Brush your teeth.
Good one.
I don't wear a suit. I mean, unless you're interviewing at a financial company, that advice is dead and gone. I think that's overkill.
Well, call. I mean, talk to the HR person and say, well, what should I wear? What's the proper attire for your environment?
It was good that Richie asked that on ours because I said a leather clown suit, and he said formal or informal.
Yes.
I'm like, what color? I mean,
I think it also really helps to know like where you're applying. What's the business do? What market are they in? Just so you have some basic understanding about what you're getting into.
And you can Google usually if you Google for their HR department, they'll have pictures for larger companies. They have pictures of the office, and you can see what people wear. You can see what kind of environment it is. Next up, Augusto asks, I would like to know the best practice. You came to the wrong room. In order to keep user principals in an always-on environment synced between the principal and any replicas.
Well,
yeah, you're ready. Yeah.
I mean, there's lots of different ways to do that, right? I mean, you can use good old-fashioned T-SQL scripting. You can set up automation through, of course, PowerShell to look at user principals that exist on both servers, do a compare, find out what's missing. I don't really have a lot of AGs that I administer, but in all that I've done with it, that's how I've approached it, is I just have a basic compare of what's there. And with PowerShell, if you're able to create custom objects and read in those permissions, you can do things like compare object and then see where the differences lie.
Instead of redoing them, dumping them all and redoing them every time.
Yeah.
Oh, Pablo says, I'm getting I/O requests that take longer than 15 seconds. Notorious. I keep saying I'm going to write a blog post about that. His principal wait in the application or wait in SQL Server is write log, waiting to write to the transaction log. And his applications are getting timeouts expired. Can PowerShell help me look for disk issues?
It's funny.
Not really.
Not really. Like there's some code out there that can help you look at different wait statistics, but it's not going to be able to give you a smoking gun, just like any other kind of wait statistics query might do. You can use that to aggregate this stuff over time, so you can see if it's time-based or if you want to collect it and look at it over historical periods of time if you don't have access to a fancy, expensive monitoring tool. But as far as helping alleviate that stuff, I'm going to leave it to the real experts on this webcam.
And unfortunately, they didn't show up today.
Done here.
I think you nailed it with you know that your top wait is write log and you're getting 15-second I/O warning waits. I don't know how much more conclusive you can be from the SQL Server side. Now is when I would turn around and play around with Crystal Disk Mark. Crystal Disk Mark is a utility that will help you just quickly run a speed test. And you run Crystal Disk Mark against your laptop, you run it against the SQL Server C drive, you run it against where the data and log files live, and it'll get you just a quick sanity check on, does my storage suck completely or is it vaguely in line with a consumer-grade laptop? Most of the time when I see 15-second I/O warning errors, if I even plug a USB into my laptop, I can get faster throughput on a USB thumb drive than I can get from the storage. It really happens a lot under virtualization. I'm going to ask a related question, though, because when you talk about PowerShell and storage, Drew, you've talked about, I've heard you talk about what you do with your snapshots in Pure Storage. So talk a little bit about how you use PowerShell with that.
Yeah, so where I work, we have a ton of different non-production environments. And one thing we got in the habit of doing was we have a set schedule where we refresh our non-production environments. And before we had access to fancy, super Pure Storage, free plug for them because they're great. We were doing traditional restores, and it was like, all right, it's Friday afternoon. We're going to shut down int and dev and con or whatever. We're gonna do the refreshes. They're gonna run for however many hours to restore those databases, and then hopefully when we come in Monday morning, everything worked and we reapply permissions, right? So when we switch to the pure storage array, they have the concept of volume-based snapshots. So you can set up automation around that because it has a complete PowerShell API tied to it, where you can connect to it, set up scripting to say, all right, take a new snap, present it to this host, mount it at this disk, and then attach these databases, apply permissions, any other kind of post scripts you need to run to prep your databases for non-production. And that's what we do now. And our restores went from taking an entire weekend, at kind of worst case, obviously, but now I can do basic on-demand refreshes that take less than a minute. And, for multi-terabyte databases, it's in multiple servers. It's fantastic. And I know that other storage providers also have that, but I've seen Pure do it, and they just do it right. Like, big fan.
And I think it's something you kind of have to be a new vendor. You have to come in with all new stuff and go, all right, I'm going to have new approaches as to how I'm going to go do this and embrace things like PowerShell. Sri asks, and this is a good one for Richie. Sri what are the roles and responsibilities of a SQL architect or a database architect?
Well, we really make a lot of coffee. We, I don't know, have a meeting or two and go home. I mean, that's what else we do.
I know you wouldn't say anything about documentation.
Yeah. What the hell is that? What is it? Mainly, we database architects will get around, talk to the business a lot. So they know a lot about the business and how the business works. And because they need to understand really the intricacies of how everything works so they could properly model it in the database. So that is, in essence, what a data architect does. Understands the business enough to know how to properly model it to the database where it's fast, it's efficient, and it does what the business needs it to do. So in the days of NoSQL now, that's kind of changed a little bit because a lot of these NoSQL databases, you don't need models anymore. They're all just kind of thrown in there. So you can kind of move very willy-nilly. That has its own set of challenges as is. But mostly that's kind of what we do. We understand how the kind of gotchas of a database engine and what kind of modeling we need to do. I remember there was one project that I was doing that I had one of my guys help with a lot of the architecture, and he did a fantastic job. I mean, he really knew his stuff, and we pulled out database patterns, and we did some other stuff, and we all threw it in there, and the database was pristine. It was great, except when we threw the ORM on top of it, it crapped out a log, and it just made everything super slow, of which we had to change the architecture of the database so that the ORM would be perfect, would be faster and just work right. So a lot of times we do our job as database architects really super well, sometimes too well, where the application itself doesn't keep up with what we're trying to do. So there's a balance there, and there's a give and trade to kind of everything that we do as database architects. And well, what if we do this? Then there's something over here, and there's always that. We're trying to find that middle ground when we're doing that. I mean, I guess I could go for another hour. Are you okay with that? I mean, start pulling books out.
I was going to say, so like, for example, what I know, we've had customers come to us and say, you have a data architect in the form of Richie. Can you just come in and architect a database for us? Like, tell us what we need. And like, there's so much back and forth conversation with the business and understanding what the application is. You want that guy on your team for good. If you bring in a consultant for it, you're basically writing them checks for the rest of your life because they're going to build up all this knowledge about your business, and you're going to wish you had that in-house instead of being held hostage by an outsider.
Yeah, and you mentioned documentation too, and that's a big part of it as well. A lot of, from what I understand, a lot of the database architects, all they do is come out with the ERD, and that's it. And so you have a data model, and that's all you get. But I've always found that the best data modelers also do a lot of business documentation, whether then that's business process flows or whatever that is. So all that is down, so then you could actually say, hey, here's my business flow, and here's how it maps into my data flows, and it all kind of goes that way.
I kind of, database architect doesn't really get thrown around a lot where I work, but we have a lot of people that refer to themselves as data modelers. I guess, kind of works in the same vein. And ironically, the same person that helped model a lot of the stuff that we do is also the person that helped me embrace ORMs. So John Kruger, if you're listening, you take credit for that.
And that always comes up on the blog. I've been talking about writing a blog post for a while too. There's people who bash ORMs all the time. There was a blog post on Hacker News recently that Richie and I were looking at, and people come out in droves and are like, ORMs suck. Everyone should know exactly how to write T-SQL. I'm like, we don't have time. You got to ship products. You got to ship features.
Yeah.
You got to get paid.
And well, the other thing is that who's writing the SQL, right? I mean, when I was a manager, that was my big question. Who's writing the SQL? And do the people that will be writing SQL, do they know SQL, right? Whether that's the DBA that maybe comes from an administration and doesn't have a strong, SQL language background, or if it's developers who don't have a strong database background. So who does that leave, really? I mean, who's writing, the SQL that's tight and gets what it needs? I mean, how many times, Brent, have we gone to clients and they're missing where clauses? I mean, just the base level simple things. And they're missing all this stuff. So ORMs kind of prevents a lot of that. Now, as opposed to me understanding SQL, I just have to understand my language, and I can focus more on business stuff. Now we're talking about benefits and trade-offs there. ORMs inherently, they're not bad. It's how they're used that's bad.
I mean, it's like nuclear power. It can be used for good and evil, and you don't want to get any on you.
I thought for sure where Richie was going to go was it depends on the quality of the person writing the SQL, because I've had several check-ins into our own products where I've written queries for the wrong language. I'm like, oh, this is perfect T-SQL. It doesn't even work in Postgres. Yeah, no.
I have a whiteboard that says that I keep track of how many times you break the build and announce it via Twitter.
Yes.
Well, we have it, but opposite. It's how many times Brent didn't break the build, and that's when it's announced.
I think one. I think I've had one build or two builds go through.
It was one. Full disclosure, it's not Brent's fault. So,
jeez.
No, it's not.
Turge asks, do y'all have any experience with the performance impact of enabling Query Store on production servers? Drew, have y'all turned on Query Store on yours?
We haven't. It's not something we fully embraced yet because we have such a mishmash of SQL versions. We only have one. We have a couple 2016 instances. We're in the process of thinking about upgrading some to 2017, but we don't really have any kind of plan to do that right now. I'd like to, but it's not something we've turned on. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that have done a lot of good case studies about kind of what you should and shouldn't do. I'm not one of them, but I'd love to turn it on and watch plans evolve over time because we do have some pretty in-depth store procedures for stuff that run, and I would love to be able to track that stuff.
I've seen what Microsoft initially touted was something like a 1 to 3% overhead. And the way I always feel about it is it's a lot like a car's dashboard. If you want to know how fast you're going, you need a speedometer. And the weight of a dashboard and a speedometer and all that slows your car down a little. But if you don't have the dashboard, you don't really know how fast you're going. So people are just like, it feels fast or it feels slow. So if you need to know which queries are performing better or worse, then you want to turn this on. I would just say make sure that you're on a recent cumulative update of either 2016 or 2017 because they fixed a lot of bugs in Query Store over the last 3, 4, 5 months.
And part of that is, too, is, with the monitoring tools we have, we can actually see degradation of similar statements over time. So it seemed to me like it'd be kind of redundant, but at the same time, I know what it has and what it offers.
What do y'all use SQL Sentry or what do you use?
We're Sentry One customers, and they have the ability to kind of see different statements, and they put out a nice little chart about how they're performing over time.
And it works with any supported SQL Server version. It's not like it's just 2016 or newer.
Right.
Yeah, that was my feeling with Query Store. Is it's wonderful for people who don't have a monitoring tool already, and that also are on 2016. So if you fall into those two categories, 2016 or 2017, it's a smaller audience. Most of the people who needed that kind of performance or that kind of monitoring already got it with third-party tools. But let's see. And the last one in the queue, if anybody has other questions, otherwise we'll close the webcast over this one. So feel free to get your questions in. Otherwise, we'll bid you adieu. Colin says, there are 100 ways to set a date time variable to the beginning of the day. Oh, I love that. He has a method in there using convert date time, flipping it over into a date field. This way seems super simple and straightforward to me. What are the downsides? The big one on that one is SARGability or SARGability, depending on which part of the United States you're from. SQL Server may look at that function and go, I have no idea what the hell is going to come out of this. So it also depends on whether or not you're seeking for it, whether you're just rendering it as report output, all kinds of things. If I'm going to set it as part of a search, like in a where clause, I'm usually going to set a variable either outside in my app somewhere and then set it that way so that when SQL Server builds the execution plan, it sees a parameter with the exact date that you're looking for. Otherwise, if you set an internal variable into your code, you can end up using the density vector, which will get you wacko statistics for how many rows SQL Server is going to come back with. Let's see. Anand says, oh, how difficult is it to move SSRS off of your main production server?
Yikes.
Yeah, I assume I have no help, no third-party tools, and can have little or no downtime. Damn. Damn. What? Yeah, wow.
All I know about SSRS is you want to back up your keys. That's all I know. Like that's the only way. That's the only way you can move stuff is to back up your keys from SSRS. I think as long as you do that, you can pretty much do whatever you want.
I would say if anything, you put it behind a load balancer too. So you put, if you have any kind of F5 or any kind of load balancing type tool, that you first start by pointing everyone at the load balancer and then put your existing 2008 behind the load balancer, just so that way, whenever it comes time for the cutover, you can do that with little to no work. Yeah. Plus, later, you can add in multiple reporting server VMs if you want to for high availability too.
Yeah, and the bigger question is, I don't think you lose anything going from 2008 R2 to 2014, but I have no idea. That would be the other thing is what's going to break.
And I'd also ask what you're going to gain too. SSRS isn't terribly resource intensive. It doesn't use that much memory. It uses some, but it's just not as bad as like integration services or analysis services, which are total pigs. Not that they're bad. They're great applications. I'm just saying they use a lot of resources. But make sure that there's a bang for the buck on the other side too, just that you're going to get something out of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to use new hardware on it, might as well move the main production server over there rather than SSRS. Yeah. But if you're moving to like a small VM or something like that, no, don't do that. That's no good. No.
And ultimately, it's where the queries run, right? So like, it doesn't matter where SSRS runs. It's going to connect to an instance and run a big select star. It doesn't matter where that happens, right? Like,
yeah. Anon adds on, our team split and the reporting team is now in a different organization. Politics. In that case, it's their problem. You stand up the server whenever you want and I'll give you the data. Adrian says, we use VMware and we're trying to figure out whether or not we should use one data file per socket for TempDB or one data file per core. Like how many TempDB files do I have? And he says at the end, I have super high latency. So I think he's thinking that more files are going to help him in terms of latency. Drew, when you all set up new TempDB data files, how many you use per server?
Well, we're a VMware shop, and I typically go, if my server has 8 CPUs or 8 vCPUs or less, I tend to go 8 files. If it goes any bigger than that, I kind of see diminishing returns, but that's just my experience. I haven't really seen any like TempDB contention over that. Now, granted, like we don't have like any super powerful VM SQL servers, although we just did get some new hardware. I think our biggest virtualized CPU in a cluster is probably 8 vCPUs per. But even then, if it was bigger, and maybe it is a little bit bigger than that, I still think I only went 8. And I think I saw that advice somewhere.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's in our setup checklist too. I'm fine with, some people will tell you 4, some people will tell you 8. Either of those numbers is fine. And in terms of more files helping you with file latency, that's probably not going to happen. I would go check Crystal Disk Mark. Just go run Crystal Disk Mark for a quick rule of thumb kind of test against your I/O, and run it against your desktop and compare to see the two differences. Then prepare to open sadtrombone.com. Tishal says, Drew, do you have the scripts that you presented on Group By? I watched, but I couldn't find the scripts. Oh, those are in your GitHub repo.
Yeah, so man, it's been a while since I presented on GroupBuy, but so my GitHub, it's a ridiculous last name. So the easiest way to get there, because it has my last name in the URL, if you head over to my website, which is port1433.com, so port1433.com, over on the right-hand side, there's a little GitHub icon in the lower right, a little Octocat. If you click on that guy, that'll take you to my repositories, and any publicly available code that I've shared has been there. I'm not sure. There he is. Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah. So you click that little guy. Those icons could admittedly be a little bit bigger, but I'm not a designer. So if you click there, that'll take you over to my repositories, and like I said, any publicly available code that I've ever done is on there. Rich, you should really upgrade IE.
Oh, this is me.
That's not me. You should really
Tell and who is this adorable little creature here with the bow tie on?
That's Rocky, who's actually behaving himself right now. Usually he's down here all up in my business, but that's Rocky. He's my little monster. Runs my life.
Let's see. Next.
Are you using .NET Nuke for your website?
Nah, WordPress.
Trying to find that guy who's using .NET Nuke.
It's not me.
I'll still look.
Oh. Let's see here. Marcy says, we have always run reporting services and analysis services on their own servers, and over the years, we've gone from 2008 to 2014 without anything breaking, and the report builder version is always improved with the latest, so just stand it up and see. Brian also adds, I just restored my reporting services databases to the new instance and then fixed the data course pointers back to or prior to going live. The keys is the one other thing to keep in mind there, any kind of encryption keys on SSRS. And then Michael Tilley says, holy crap, there actually is a sadtrombone.com. Of course there is.
Yes, there is. Mm-hmm.
There's also the autoplay version, which is the one you need to send people.
Yes. Why does that not work? What do you mean Google Chrome? It's trying to plug. I hate Internet Explorer so badly. So anyway, anywho, back over to the PowerPoint. Put that back up and go back to the questions list. That's what teaches me for trying to surf the web on a crappy version of Internet Explorer. Mark asks, I'm adding a database to an existing availability group. For some reason, the secondary files are not going to the same drive and location as the primary. They're going to a default folder. Do you have any idea why this is happening? Drew, do y'all use availability groups?
We don't, because we can't. We don't use Enterprise Edition. Although I know we can use basic AGs now, but we don't use them. We're a traditional failover cluster group right now. Although we are getting to that point, we're exploring a lot of new DR stuff for this coming year, and we're going to start moving to that stuff with some like remotely available stuff. But that's a weird question. Like, and forgive me, but is that? I think you set the default directories when you install SQL, right?
Yeah, I bet money that you're restoring the databases without using the with move commands to move those databases somewhere else. If you're restoring the databases manually, as opposed to going through the GUI or using direct seeding, which will just automatically do it for you, if you do manual restores, you have to specify where you want the data and log files to go. And the folder structure needs to be identical across all of your replicas. Otherwise, whenever you add a data file or log file on the primary, it will break if that folder doesn't exist, drive letter or folder doesn't exist over on the secondaries. Your replication will stop working. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Oh, Mark follows up with, he says, we're using the GUI to do it automatically, and the folder structure is identical. In that case, I would actually post it, but I would post with screenshots. Do as many screenshots as you can on dba.stackexchange.com, because you might have found a bug. I don't think you did, because I've done this a bunch of times myself, but it's possible that you found a bug, and other people will see it when you go over to dba.stackexchange.com. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out with us this week. Drew, before we go, we should say, so your upcoming training class. So you want to tell us a little bit about what you're teaching and who's the target audience for it?
Yes. So this will be kind of the third go-around of this class. It's PowerShell for DBAs, hosted by the fine folks at Brent and Ozar Unlimited, and it's targeted at people who have a desire to learn PowerShell and how it can be used to administer things like SQL Server. So it's a 2-day class. As you know, for signing up and joining it, you get access to a VM for both days. And we start out at the base level. We talk about how to do as simple things as like declaring variables in PowerShell and doing basic scripting actions. And then day 2, we move into how you connect to SQL Server, how you can script things out, how you can automate things. Really a lot of fun to present. It's been really good. People seem to like it. So hopefully you guys, if you have desire to learn that stuff, you can come out and learn with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Marcy says, do you have a link for the class? Yes, if you go to brentozar.com and right on the homepage, there's a list of classes. You can see Drew's shiny, happy face smiling, and the next
extra
class,
shiny today.
When's the next one? It's in like June, I think.
It's like the last week of June, I think.
Sounds right. All right. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out with us this week, and we will see y'all next week on Office Hours. Adios,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys.